This 13.6 tier list update features our very first ranking of the recently released Melio, along with a look at how the meta is shaping out for every single role. Thanks to the help of our challenger players and analyzing the most recent data, we strive to bring you guys the most timely and accurate updates to the solo queue tier list each and every patch. But before we get into it, be sure to check out SkillCapped if you want to truly get better at League of Legends. We're the only service that offers a money-back guarantee if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service. We do this because our service really does work, and if it doesn't work for you, you shouldn't pay. Learn more at the end of this video or click the link in the description below. Riot slipped in a couple of last-minute Mundo buffs we originally were not expecting, and he's seen a nice uptick in power as a result. Health regen was increased, recast timer on W lowered from 1 second to 0.5 seconds, and E damage to monsters increased from 150 to 200%. W change is a really nice quality of life buff, and the health regen changes help to make up for those recent Doran shield nerfs. If you're in need of a good answer to meta tanks like Malphite and Cho'Gath, Mundo does much better than the majority of fighter top laners. Especially for the lower ranks, Mundo is looking like a really solid pickup for 13.6 and will be placed in our top lane S tier. For an update on the Vayne buff, she's not performing quite as well as we expected up in top lane after the changes, but there's a really spicy new build that has been popping up. Since Vayne Q was buffed, you now max the ability out first, and there's this one item that amplifies this Q max power even further. Essence Reaver Rush Vayne is a really interesting setup, and although we don't have a massive sample size so far, it's currently top lane Vayne's highest win rate first item. In theory, it makes a lot of sense, because your poke with Q will hit extremely hard due to the Spellblade proc. Essence Reaver into Shield Bow and Infinity Edge is what the 3-item core is looking like. The build is all about stacking that AD and taking full advantage of the AD ratio buff to Vayne's Q. For the complete top lane tier list, we have Malphite, Darius, and Olaf as the most optimal solo Q carries. Malphite should be of highest priority in 13.6 if your main goal is to rank up from top lane. Gangplank and Tryndamere were 2 top laners affected by indirect nerfs this patch due to Quick Blades losing power. Both champs have seen a slight drop off in win rate, but nothing too major. Despite the nerfs, it does still look like Quick Blades is an optimal item for both champions as players are experimenting with other builds, but they aren't performing as well as Quick Blades. Top 3 low elo top laners of the patch are Yorick, Garen, and Nasus. Fiora, Darius, and Malphite are who we have highest on the ban list. We predicted in our pre-patch tier list that Echo would really break through in 13.6 with the Nashor's buffs, and that has played out so far. In 13.5, Nashor's and Lichbane had near identical win rates as second purchases on Echo. Now in 13.6, Echo players running Nashor's are winning about 1.5% more than those going Lichbane. An even more underrated strategy on Echo jungle is actually rushing the Nashor's instead of Rocket Belt. This way you have a much quicker clear speed, and the skirmishing potential is also quite strong. A build you should definitely try on Echo this patch is Nashor's Rush into Rocket Belt second and Rabadon's third. You can find Echo in our jungle S tier as one of the better carries. No direct changes to any jungler in 13.6, so our OP tier looks very similar, with Jarvan, Evelynn, Fiddlesticks, and one newcomer being Wukong. Wu's been loving the recent shift in jungle meta away from demonic embrace abusers to a more AD-centric meta, with Lee Sin, Hecarim, Kayn, and Vi being picked a ton. Lee Sin is back to being the most played jungler by a long shot, so who can you play to take advantage of that? Wukong and Gragas are 2 meta junglers who are great options. Poppy is more of an off-meta jungler who does a phenomenal job at shutting Lee down due to her W. Optimal low elo jungle champions are Fiddlesticks, Mordekaiser, and Jarvan. Evelynn, Kayn, and Jarvan are 3 of the best jungle bans. One off-meta mid laner who has been flying under the radar gets even stronger for 13.6, and that champ is Varus. This is AP Varus mid, and due to the Nashor's buffs this patch, he has seen a nice spike in power. Mid Varus actually has a higher win rate than bot lane Varus now, which is pretty crazy. The build you want to rush is Nashor's Rush into Riftmaker second and Rabadon's third. 15 ability haste being added to Nashor's is huge for Varus, as this AP version of him is extremely reliant on his cooldowns to deal damage. The rune page you'll want to run is Hail of Blades along with Sorcery for secondaries, grabbing Absolute Focus, and Gathering Storm. Don't sleep on AP Varus for 13.6, as we will be moving him into a very respectable A tier slot. Another mid laner on the rise for 13.6 who's an amazing answer to many of the meta picks is Galio. Galio can impact solo queue super well due to his strong roaming and skirmish power, but if you can specifically pick him into melee dive champs like Katarina, Sylas, or Akali, he's even more disgusting. W buff this patch makes the champion even tankier and more difficult for those assassins to take him down. Skill floor is quite low in Galio, which means you can pick him up and start seeing success fairly quickly. We'll be giving Galio the bump, moving him from A into S tier for the mid-patch update. OP tier for mid lane is not going to change from the pre-patch tier list, as we have Annie, Cassiopeia, and Pantheon locking down the spots. slots. One other adjustment to the mid lane tier list consists of moving Aurelion Sol down one slot further. We had originally moved him from OP into S for the pre-patch update, but the nerfs have been affecting him slightly more than anticipated, warranting a move into A. It's really the higher elos where Aurelion is being exploited the most for his weaker early game. Low elo Aurelion players are still seeing quite good success in 13.6. The spread is actually pretty nuts, as silver Aurelion players are winning about 52% of the time, as opposed to diamond and above Aurelions only winning 47% of the time. If this were a high elo tier list, you could definitely argue for Aurelion dropping even lower on the tier list, but since we cater our rankings more heavily to the lower ranks, he lands in A tier. Top 3 low elo mids of the patch are Veigar, Malzahar, and Annie. Annie, Zed, and Veigar are 3 of the higher value mid lane bans. ADC saw a massive amount of changes this patch, but in the grand scheme of things, they didn't really shift the meta all too much. OP tier will continue to consist of Jinx along with Veigar. Veigar nerfs have more heavily impacted him in the mid lane, while bot lane Veigar continues to perform insanely well. Despite the lethal tempo nerfs, the rune is still looking like a great pickup for 13.6. There's only a select few lethal users who are doing well with alternative options, Tristana and Kai'Sa being 2 of them, both seeing better results running Hail of Blades. Aphelios is one other ADC who's been dropping lethal in exchange for press the attack. As for Bloodthirster and Quick Blades, they are still optimal purchases. However, you can no longer be rushing Bloodthirster like before. The win rate of Bloodthirster Rush absolutely plummeted for 13.6, as Riot nerfed the shield strength very heavily at the earlier ranks. Shield value didn't drop off as much as the later ranks though, so picking up Bloodthirster as a 3rd or 4th item remains to be a great option. Top 3 low elo ADCs of the patch are Tristana, Misfortune, and Veigar. Jinx, Veigar, and Samira are all really good bans. Melio has been live for a few days now, and it's pretty safe to say he's looking incredibly strong. So much so that Riot has already had to issue a bunch of hotfix nerfs to combat his power. Passive damage scaling has been reduced at the later levels, only going from 15 scaling to 50% to 15 scaling to 35%. W healing has been reduced drastically at the later ranks, going from 80 scaling to 200 to 70 scaling to 150. Final changes are to Melio's E, as its shield strength and cooldown have both been nerfed. Despite the nerfs, Melio continues to perform very well in solo queue. The safety he brings to his carries with the massive shield from E, along with the cleanse he gives his team from R, gives Melio so much power with hyper carry ADCs. So far, the ADCs that are performing best with Melio include Jinx, Kog'Maw, and Vayne, all champions that can thrive in teamfights with a protector support. Not only does Melio provide his carry with a ton of safety, but his passive damage is completely nuts too. Melio is basically Lulu on steroids, providing his carry with so much durability, but adding an insane amount of offensive power as well. The build you'll want to run is Shurelya's with Ardent and Redemption. Moonstone is also a viable mythic option as well if you don't need the added mobility from Shurelya's active. Aerie is the keystone rune with Mana Flow, Transcendence, and Scorch. Roll with Bone Plating and Revitalize for secondaries. Straight into the OP tier is where Melio will be placed for the very first time. So for the support tier list, there are a lot of really strong options right now, with Melio, Thresh, Annie, Rakan, and Senna making up the OP tier. Now, if you don't want to use your ban on Melio, what can you use to counter him? Melio does not have a gap close in his kit, so he's definitely susceptible to hard engage. For that reason, Blitz and Rakan are 2 supports seeing good success in Melio so far. Picking an Enchanter into Melio is not really the best play, as he's just going to outclass you with his superior kit. Other than the Melio release, nothing majorly meta shifting for the role in 13.6, so we have no other changes on the tier list. Optimal low elo carries to the patch are Melio, Annie, and Zyra. The best bans for support include Rakan, Thresh, and Melio. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about SkillCapped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent Challenger players into Elo Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. So there you have it everyone, the complete look at the solo queue meta for patch 13.6. Thank you all so much for watching, have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video.